Hey, this is Kieran with Coaches Corner Chats, and joining me is Jason Crist. Jason, where are you at and what are you up to?
I'm in the mecca of Spring Arbor, Michigan, which is in south central Michigan. And in the off season right now, man, just trying to make the players here that are here better and get some fresh blood in for next year to keep us going in a good direction.
What part of Michigan is Spring Arbor at?
We're about 30 minutes to the west of Ann Arbor and about 30 minutes to the south of Lansing. So right between the green and white and the maize and blue, if you know what I mean. So yeah, just right along I-94.
And how long have you been there?
This last fall was my 23rd season. So I've been here a minute.
You don't hear that very often where coaches stay for that long. What about Spring Arbor, I guess, one, brought you there in the first place? Like, what kind of stood out for you and why have you stayed there that long?
I was a local high school player about 5 minutes from here. Spring Arbor did not recruit me. I was recruited by 4 or 5, like a handful of colleges, one of those being Western Michigan, which is a MAC school about an hour from here. And initially thought I was going to go there and play soccer until the spring of my senior year. And I came and worked out a couple times with the guys here at Spring Arbor, even though I hadn't recruited me, just to keep sharp, that kind of a thing. And kind of fell in love with the place, even though I said I would never come here as in my backyard. And the people here were a little bit different than anywhere else I had visited or had been. So I ended up calling the Western Michigan coach and telling him that I was thinking about attending Spring Arbor instead. And he understood. He actually was a former coach here. So he was like, I understand, wish you the best. And I came here and I played for a couple of years, got married. My wife is from the area, got into coaching, was offered the assistant job and was that for a year, and then took the program over, and I have never looked back. I've been right here the whole time.
So, what got you started with soccer? Were you one of those that picked it up as a youth, or were you a late bloomer? How did soccer in Michigan come about for you?
Yeah, I like this area is not a big club soccer area. We're about an hour outside of Detroit, which would be, a big club soccer area. So the club soccer that I played was not a super high level. Our high school team was quite good. And so like both my graduating class and the one right underneath it there's a lot of talent. So I had a good high school experience, and the team made some good runs in the state tournament. It's just something that I started at like age 7 or 8 and loved playing, and just, it's something that's in your blood.
Was there ever a part of you that saw, even as you were growing up, did you ever think, oh, coaching might be what I'd go into? Or what was it that kind of brought you into the coaching fray?
Yeah, I had really no idea. I played for a couple years here, and then kind of paused my college education, got married. My wife finished her school, and when she was done, I came back and actually changed directions for my degree and picked up a teaching certificate, teaching degree. And that wasn't the plan initially. And so along with teaching comes coaching sometimes, right? And obviously I was very passionate about soccer. I started coaching at the local high school on the boys side. Funny story, the guy I started coaching with he's actually my assistant now. So he's my assistant coach at college, but I started coaching with him in high school back when I was 20, I was probably 22, or, right out of college kind of a thing, coaching high school soccer. And then I picked up a girls job at Western. So I was coaching at 2 rival high schools, one for boys, one for girls. And then had somebody ask me to do some club soccer, some premier soccer, got involved in that, started licensing, and then really picked up a passion and a love for coaching. Actually love coaching way more than I ever loved playing.
When you were doing the boys and the girls high school level, what are differences that you had to go about? Like, I'm sure you had to change maybe your demeanor or how you went about things. What are some of the differences dealing with like males versus females?
Yeah, I'm so much smarter now than I was then. I was not, I didn't know what I didn't know at that point. Right. And so, I think that one of the things I love about coaching women is that they're very team oriented. They're very team driven. There are challenges that are different than what the guys' challenges have. But I think with women, communication is a big thing. Relationship is a huge thing. They, generally speaking, women's players will run through a brick wall with you if they know that you care and that you're invested, and you're invested in the relationship beyond just the soccer field, right? Whereas I think guys, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more managing ego. And I try to get every woman that I've coached probably through the years to shoot the ball or to be selfish. And every guy that I've ever coached, I try to get him to pass the ball and be less selfish. So like, it's totally a different mindset. Fun. Both sides are fun, but just very, very different for sure.
You mentioned the assistant coach at the high school level, and now with you. How cool has that been? How has your relationship with him kind of changed over those years? But not just because of the level that you've come up to, but when you look back at then and now, how have you both evolved?
When I was a freshman in college, he was my senior captain. So he was 3 years older than I am, and he was the captain of the college team here at Spring Arbor when I first started. And he was a very impactful person on me as far as like the way that he dealt with people and how he invested in relationships. I thought those things were really, really cool. He was one of those guys that the young players could lean on and go to when they had problems. So yeah, somebody that I value very much as a friend, and even it's weird, he's my assistant coach, but somewhat as a mentor. Like when I first started, he was one of the guys that helped kind of fan the flames to get me going. And to work with him now in the capacity, he is one of the best in the business. His name's Sam Alstead, and we just won our third national championship together. He's just one of the very best right-hand men in the business. And so I feel very fortunate to work with him.
What has it been like kind of staying in that area, saying you only live 5 minutes away? What's it been like kind of seeing what you as a youth saw Spring Arbor as, and now what it is now, like just being a part of it is, and being, a part of the environment, I guess, for so long now?
For sure. Again, like I said, I didn't plan to come. It was I think every high school senior wants to get out of the area and move away from home and all that kind of stuff. But it was really the people that sold this place for me. We have great facilities here. Like we have a nice, big enough place where not everybody knows your name, but small enough place where everybody will recognize you, right? So like, you're walking down the sidewalk and everyone's saying, "Hey, how's your day?" And it's really a genuine, authentic kind of place. That's one of the things that I love best about Spring Arbor. I've had a lot of opportunities to leave, through the years and move on to a bigger school, that kind of a thing. But that's really not something that I've been searching for. I really enjoy, I'm passionate about what I do here.
I was just going to ask, so you've been there for 23 years, clearly having success at a high level. Is there a part, like, how do you keep that fire going? Like once you've reached the top, they always say it's hard to stay on top. How do you continue to like just reload and keep crushing it? One, it sounds like having an assistant coach next to you who's got that passion and energy and what have you is awesome. But how do you keep doing it year in and year out?
People. I think that I'm somebody that is really passionate about people. And so when we're recruiting, we're looking for talented players, right? But that's just one screen we run our recruits through. Like I really believe that the success that we've had here is all on the shoulders of the women that we've had. We've had fantastic people, and to be able to set standards for a culture and help empower young women to like own a culture and invest in it. I think that's something that's a favorite thing about my job, and to watch players grow, emotionally, and grow spiritually and academically and athletically while they're here. Where they arrive is so different than where they are when they leave. And that's the part that I'm really passionate about. The culture is, I think, a huge key to the success.
How do you gauge character like in the recruiting process? What is it? Questions you ask because you watch them during games or when they're on the sidelines, like the moments where they're not involved in soccer? How does one kind of get a gauge of, hey, she might be a really good fit for Spring Arbor?
Yeah, all of that, but also the on-campus interaction, I think, is the most important part. So yeah, I'm looking, and I show up to games early, or I might show up to a training session to see how they interact in a training session. We do all the things that all the standard coaches do. We stalk the social media and all that kind of stuff. But when they get to campus, and because we're fortunate to have a really good culture that is, I think, I think the players are very protective of it. So when we bring players in, it's pretty easy to tell, right? Like they come in here, and when a player comes, she'll know in 24 hours whether or not she fits. Like she'll either be like, "Those are my people," or she's gonna be like, I'm going somewhere else. That is not for me. And our players the same way, right? Like they're very interested in having teammates that are rowing the boat, so to speak, the same way that they're rowing the boat. And so they help do a lot of the screening for me. I lean on them pretty heavily.
So I've heard culture. When you look way back 23 years ago and you took over the program, what were those like pillars or foundational things you were trying to create? Maybe even just beyond culture.
Yeah, I think that was a learning, like a learning process, right? I'll be real honest with you. The first thing I did when I got here was to go out and try to nab all the best players I could get, and I put zero weight on anything that they would bring to the program outside of the lines.
Hmm.
Um, that was not a good recipe. It didn't serve me well over the first couple of years. Not that the team wasn't having success, because we had some good players and we had some success, but it was a lot of work behind the scenes. There's a lot of other things going on, that were that sucked some of the joy out of it, I guess. Right. And so I figured out pretty early on that I needed to get people in here that were not just passionate about playing soccer, but also passionate about building something together, like cooperatively. Right. And so I think what I shifted my focus away from the what, and I shifted it on to the who, the how, and the why. And once we kind of got those things prioritized and we started like making that live itself out inside of our recruiting and inside of our day-to-day culture in here, things became really easy. We're focused on the people and we're focused on the process, how we do the process and why we do the process. And if we focus on those things, the what takes care of itself.
Has that self reflection and the ability to admit as a coach that maybe I went the wrong route, was that difficult to do? Or is that something you were like, this is like you talk about processes? Was that something you like knew going in? It's not going to be all perfect, like roses and flowers at the beginning. It's going to have some bumps and what have you.
Yeah. I mean, I think back to culture has changed so much, right? In the 20 years that I've been here, I think back to some of the moments as a young coach, and I can't believe, some of the mistakes that I made. And I think that's a lot of young coaches would probably say that it's definitely a process. And I didn't have that stuff figured out early on. And I think it took me, I would say it even took me 7 or 8 years to really get those things like etched in stone, like really know what I was looking for and what I wanted to build. And then I think the final layer of that is just the last piece of it is just the empowerment of the players, like allowing this to be theirs. And this is not mine and it's not Sam's. This is the players program, and they own it and they own the culture. They build the culture. They maintain the culture, the standards, like those things. Very rarely do I have to push on the field for a work rate thing or even a mental engagement standard. Like if something's not being met, the upperclassmen are all over that stuff. Like I just smile and watch them deal with it. And so I think that took a really long time to build it that way. And I think you need players that are willing to grow in that kind of a way. But when you're a young player and you see it being lived out for you, and then you all of a sudden, you're no longer a freshman, now you're a sophomore, and then you're a junior, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's my turn to drive the car. And it just kind of is a natural progression down through the ranks.
When you look back, not only has your coaching changed in the 23 years, but what about the players? Like I think back to that's like 2000, 2001. There wasn't a whole lot of internet and Snapchats and all this type of stuff. And just the way the kids are now, they're so much better athletically and their skill is so high. What have you seen kind of during your 2+ decades, the development of players, I guess, overall?
Yeah, I think players are a lot more complicated now than what they were, 15 years ago. For a lot of reasons, social media being one of them. It's like, I don't know if I know you live in the Twitter world. So like all of a sudden, I would say in the last 5 years, recruiting has really spilled into Twitter. And so everything's a brand, right? Like every recruit's out there trying to make a brand. And um, I am keen on that. I understand that our brand has a place in the market as well. And as a harsh reality, I have to live in that world a little bit. It's not my favorite. I just want 18, 17, 18, 19-year-old kids to be kids. And they're out there kind of, having to promote themselves as a product or as a brand. I think that's a tough ask of a kid that age because they're going to mess it up. And that's okay. They're 17, 18, 19 years old. They're going to mess those things up. And so I think they're a lot more complicated, and how you communicate with them has to be a lot more intentional. There are a lot of people that are very uncomfortable on a phone these days. So, you almost have to set an appointment to have a call kind of a thing. So I always text first and, hey, are you ready to call? I'm going to call in 15 minutes, so that they're prepared. Because otherwise, if you catch them off guard, they might not answer, or if they do, it might get kind of awkward. So It's just different day and age.
The other thing that you brought up was so halfway through college, you're playing and then you get married. How impactful and has your wife been in this whole scheme of soccer? Everybody sees Coach Jason and he's doing his thing and they're crushing it, but there's always that other side. That's the going home and the other person that's supporting you. What impact and what has she meant in terms of your legacy that you're building there?
Yeah, I think you can't be successful in this profession if you're married without just a saint as a spouse. Like she's a saint, and I think it was the last year or 2 years, or maybe it was last time, not the last national title, but the one before. She made a social media post, and it was like, "I am a soccer widow." That's how it started, and that's the farthest thing from the truth. Like she's everywhere that we are, right? But it's a bit of a lifestyle. My kids have grown up on campus, which is a really cool thing. But it's also really a unique thing. She's great. Does not sit on the home side of the stands, sits in the visiting side, which I think is really interesting. And I'm like, honey, why don't you sit in the home stands? And she's like, well, if somebody's kid's not playing, I don't want to hear about you. And she's like, I want to be over the visiting side. Said, besides, then I can hear what they're saying about you, and I can bring that back to you. And I'm like, that's great. Both sides of the stands are like tearing me up during the game. That's great.
So you mentioned your kids. Is there a chance or a part of you that will end up coaching them as they grow up and get older?
Yeah, so I have coached both of them at one point. My daughter is now she runs track, and she's also pretty artistically talented, and she's in the band and the choir and all that kind of thing. So didn't really go down the soccer route. My son also he played travel soccer, but decided not to play in high school. He is an avid and talented wrestler. So his wrestling season is at near the end right now. So he's had a really good sophomore year. He was a freshman on the varsity last year. So then neither one of them are soccer junkies. They've grown up around the game, I think. My son enjoys it, but he plays to be with his friends, kind of a thing. It's not what drives him. And I don't pretend to understand why he loves wrestling. I don't pretend to understand that. But I love watching him. I love watching him wrestle.
That was going to be my next question is now that you get to see like your daughter perform or do her art or run track or your son doing wrestling, how cool is it to be on the other side of things versus I'm coaching and now to be able to sit back and enjoy watching your kids do their thing?
Oh man, it's so fun to be a dad. It's like one of my favorite things in the whole world to be able to unplug and just not coach. Whether he's wrestling, I think wrestling is super unique because there's just his wrestling coach would say it's a man building sport. Like there's no one to blame when things go wrong. It's on you, right? And so I love that for his personal development. Like I think it's developed him a lot as a person. I just love sitting in the stands and watching him go. For Samara, her interests are a little bit different, but she's super, super talented. Like I said, it's just a way for me to unplug and not be on, and just enjoy being a dad and not being a coach. And I think sometimes if I tiptoe up to that line with one of them, they'll let me know. They'll be like, Dad, my son knows more. I mean, I wrestled up till like high school. I'm like, he's way beyond me. He used to race dirt bikes, and I grew up riding dirt bikes too. And he's like, Dad, I'm like way better than you ever were. I'm like, you are correct, son. Like, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy watching you do it.
You mentioned kind of de-stressing a little bit or just turning off and not being so locked in. What are things that like as you as a head coach, how do you I mean when you go through and win a national championship, that's a lot of games beyond just the regular season. Like you're crushing and crushing. What does Jason do to like I just got to get away and I've got to like turn my soccer brain off or does it ever turn off?
It does. And I think as I've gotten older, I've learned how to manage it better. It used to be that I couldn't really turn it off and I was 24/7, going if we weren't playing, I was recruiting all the time. And I've learned to be more strategic about how I go about the job hours. I love to golf. So I play a lot of golf in the summer. I have a couple buddies that I play every Monday night, and then we play a couple other times throughout the week. So I do a lot of that. My family has a cottage in northern Michigan, which is beautiful. If you've never been to northern Michigan, I highly recommend it. So I spend time up there, fishing or hanging out, riding the trails on the bikes with my son. But yeah, time away from the game, I think, is really, really healthy. It makes me a better coach when I'm more balanced.
The other thing I was going to ask is what about those teams that were national champions. What about them? I know I've heard like culture and they must have got along really well, but what when you look back and you say, well, that team, there was what was the maybe it factor that they had when you look back, or was it different for each one?
The NAI is really unique. It is, I would say, like the recruiting rule book for the NCAA is like this thick, and for the NAI, it's like this thick. So you can, there are a lot of coaches that can get into the gray areas and get players in that would not be NCAA eligible, usually foreign players. So usually internationals, right? So what we're talking about there is like the professional rule, right? So if you're, whether you have amateur status or professional status, in the NAI, you see a lot of 23, 24, 25-year-old players that are imported pro players, more or less. What we have built here is built with 18 to 22-year-old Michigan players. We don't have, our university's not really set up to do a lot of internationals. So I think that our go-to, our mojo, has always been the culture piece. One of the things that I have found out through experiences when we get deep into the playoffs, it's very likely, it's very often that we're going to be playing a team that is comprised highly internationally, right? And because those teams are often brought in from different parts of the world, they tend to be a bit more individual in mindset, right? So when things start to go bad and they get punched in the mouth, the wheels oftentimes come off. Whereas our players are really of one mind and of one like a common mission. So when things get tough, they tend to like pull together rather than fall apart. And I think that has served us really well in the tournament runs that we've had. There's always, inside those runs, there's always moments that of adversity, right? And how your team responds to those moments of adversity, and often will determine whether or not they keep playing. And so I think that our players have been very mentally tough through the years, and a lot of that is due to the team culture that's been built.
Is there a kind of like Michigan versus everyone else kind of vibe? If you're taking like everyone knows, I'm assuming the girls probably know each other from travel soccer or from playing in high school or what have you. Is there kind of a collection? Because kind of like you said, instead of being a group from all over the place, we're mostly centralized here in Michigan, and it's we let's do this for Michigan type of feel.
Yeah, we are a little bit more diverse now than we were, say, 5, 6 years ago. We have a goalkeeper from New Zealand, which was like that was a first thing for us. Like we've had some Canadian players, but not a lot of international players. Our men's side has a lot of international players, but we have not. But I would say that, yes, especially with the first two national championships, those were built on the backs of West Michigan players. A lot of those players knew each other. They played either they played for competing high schools in the same club. We pulled a bunch of them out of the same club, or they played at the same. We had at one point, I think, 7 or 8 players from the same high school on our roster, and it was a very talented group of people. I mean, a special group of people. One of them now is actually plays for OL Reign in the NWSL. Bethany Balser, and she was the first NAI player ever to sign a contract in the NWSL, and then she's been capped with the national team a couple times now. So she was part of that core, all from Unity Christian in Grand Rapids, which is a small Christian school in Grand Rapids, but really, really talented group of people. So I think at one point, yeah, we definitely had that, like, where in Michigan, they say Detroit against everybody, right? Detroit versus everybody, but Michigan versus everybody for a while. So when I got the first, like, international player or two, I got a couple phone calls for like, coach, like, what's going on? Like, what happened to Michigan versus everybody? And so, yeah, I think we've evolved a little bit through the years, but definitely a lot. We're fortunate to live in a state where there's really great girls soccer here. Like, the level's really high. So very fortunate for that.
When you were like even in your youth, teenage years, going through high school and stuff, were you always one that was kind of step up and be a leader in situations, like maybe even when you were playing? Or has this been kind of that leadership role has been something you just kind of have picked up and have, like you've talked about, developing even from the first 7 or 8 years at Spring Arbor? Were you always one that was kind of like, hey, I'll take care of this. Hey, come here, guys, let's do this, this, and this kind of person?
I would say no. I'm a big picture thinker. So I need to surround myself with people who are good with details. I mean, I know who I am as a leader. I think I've really grown into that. And I think to this day, the more I read a bunch, and I don't think you ever stop growing as a leader. I think that's something that if you want to be good in leadership, you have to continue to stretch yourself. So I think that it is something that I've learned along the way, painfully sometimes, right? Like making mistakes and learning what not to do through doing it and having it go badly for you. I've done a bunch of that. And I try to get my players to be excited about that quality in themselves, right? Like understand that you're here to be better as a soccer player. We're here to try and win national championships and to be the best we can be together, but also you're here to develop as a person. And when you leave this campus, I want you to be prepared to go lead a sales team or to go to be a leader in your field, whatever, if you're you're a floor nurse or you're a PA or whatever you might be, like to be able to work with a group of people and to stand out and to help them find direction.
When you look at the spring going into what does an off season look like for you all? Do you take a break off? Do you get right back to it after your the required break, and then do you have spring season, and what does Spring Arbor do to prepare to make another run?
Yeah, so we will if season goes well, we'll finish in the first week of December. So first week of August is when we start. First week of December is hopefully when we finish. That would be the final site of the national tournament. And the girls get the holidays off. Like we send them home and they watch Netflix and eat junk food and do all that. And they come back in January and we put together a futsal league for them. They do that. That's on their own. Like I'll buy kind of a box of Nike gear and we'll split up some teams evenly and they play to the death because everyone wants gear, right? So they do that during January and we're not involved that much. In February, now where we're at now, we're back in the weight room, fitness testing, explosion, and all that kind of stuff, working on that kind of thing. And then balls usually come out. Well, last week we started training with balls again. So now we're working on, in the fall, we don't get as much time to work on individual players because we're just trying to get a group product out there. In the winter, we're really breaking people down individually and trying to make them better as individuals so that they can serve the collective better. So that's where the kind of the mode that we're in right now. We do get to play in the spring. We have 3 dates, generally not NAI opponents, anything from like Grand Valley's up the road an hour and a half, right? So they've got 4 or 5 D2 national championships. Play those guys. Play Ferris State, who was a Final Four team in Division II last fall, 2 falls ago, and then mid majors. So whether it be Ball State or IUPUI or IPFW or whatever, if you're within a couple hours of us, that's the kind of competition we're trying to seek out in the spring so that we can be better for fall.
You mentioned culture throughout, and people hear that and they say, "Oh, we're all about culture building." What's that look like? Is in kind of maybe 2 or 3 ideas of what you all do. What builds that culture? You can't just say it and
Right.
it happens. What things do you guys kind of put in place?
Yeah. For us, I think culture involves ownership, right? And so developing an atmosphere where players really own their own experience and both their successes and their failures. And I think that is it's a day-to-day process. And and a lot of times it's a lot of conversations with players, right? Like, all right, well, this didn't work. Why didn't it work? How can we do it better next time? And resisting the urge or helping them resist the urge to point a finger somewhere else, and kind of own their part in the process. The same thing when things are going well, right? Like, hey, this worked really well. This is why it worked really well. Here was your part in it, right? So let's apply this to across the board in more areas of your game or in more areas of your life. I think just like developing that kind of a thought process is a big start to the kind of character and the kind of culture that we're trying to develop. Is like, there's nobody else that I can blame for my success or for my failure, except unless I have addressed myself first. And so I think that happens just through conversation and it touches everything, whether it's a training piece, right? I don't have to say these things anymore because our leadership does a great job with it. But if somebody is kind of transferring blame, they usually get called out here, right? Like, nope, that's not okay. Like, that one was on you, get the next one. Right. And how you communicate those things is important. Or when something really good happens, hey, that's on you. Like, you made that happen. Good work. And I just think giving the players ownership over their role on the team, and then even taking that a step farther and applying it to leadership. Right. So my leadership group inside the team, we meet once every couple of weeks. We talk about what's working, what's not working, where there might be problems in the team or potholes we might need to navigate. I think a lot of it's just intentional conversation and relationship building.
When you're at a university as long as you have been, I'm assuming you mentioned leadership and even administration. I'm assuming that has changed quite a bit since your time there. What's it like in terms of developing relationships with those that are running the university? Like, what's that experience like to kind of get them to buy in, to get their support? What has your experience been? I'm assuming going through multiple, people that are leading the university.
Yeah, I've been through a couple presidents and a few ADs in my time here. I'm actually one of the assistant athletic directors here. Um, it can be, I mean, because everybody's got a little bit different style, leadership style, right? And so finding the sweet spot with whoever is leading the ship is a really important thing. What is it that they want from me? What is it they want from our programs? How do we play a piece in enrollment? We're a small school, right? So like we have to help with enrollment. All of our sports do. Like, what does that look like? How do we advocate for like um, proper budgeting with inflation and all that kind of stuff? Like, how do we advocate for that, but to do it responsibly? And it's like all of those things fall underneath leadership style and how people need to be approached. I think that's an area of my professional growth that has happened probably a lot in the last 15 years, is just learning how to navigate people, right? And emotional intelligence and how to read the room and all that kind of thing. It's unique and it's fun. Small school athletics, I think there's so much to be offered. And there's things that I could do here that I could never do at Michigan State. Or I couldn't do at Ball State or somewhere like that. So that's what's kind of kept me here, is the community. And I think our leadership here they provide a great community.
You mentioned being the assistant athletic director. How has that helped kind of with the coaching where you're getting to be in the mix in different ways from just soccer? Now you're dealing with some other coaches, other, sports, all that type of stuff. How has that kind of helped maybe give you talked about being a big picture person. How has that helped for you in your coaching?
Yeah, I think anytime that you can expand the lens that you look at things through, like get perspective on things, I think it's helpful to you as an individual. I think that's what that has provided for me the most is like, I used to be the sports information director, so I handled all the media. So I've been on the other side of the podcast here asking the questions, and I've called my share of basketball games and taken photos for things. I've done all that social media stuff. So I get that piece of things, but I would say administratively, like just um, being the good communication link between administration and coaching staffs. We're an interesting group. Like we're the kind of the kings of our domain, right? Like, and so we have our thing and we're trying to build our thing, but how do you blend that into a bigger department, right? How do you make that a piece of a bigger team? And then how do you make that team a bigger part of the campus as a whole? I think those are things that I have learned through being involved in administration that are that you don't think about day to day if you're a coach, right? You're just thinking about this is how I build my team, and you don't really think about how your team fits into the next level up and how that level fits into the next level up. And so those are things in professional development that have been that I've enjoyed learning in the last decade or so.
How do you go about not becoming like too result oriented? Meaning, like you're having success and having 3 NAIA championships, and people always looking at that. Like, I know you talked about like the ultimate goals. I'm creating young ladies that when they go out into the real world are going to crush it. How do you keep it even just for them? So it's not just like let's say for instance next year we don't win a championship. How do you keep that perspective of like, look, ladies, you're still doing awesome if that makes sense. Maybe a perspective. How do you keep it all um, under wraps in a way?
Sure. So I talked a little bit earlier about the who, the how, and the why. So and I think we've talked about the who a little bit and the how a little bit. But Spring Arbor is a Christian campus, and so our why here is to be excellent because we feel like we're Christ calls us to be excellent. And so like we try to keep that at the center point of everything that we do. And we try not to think about we try to stay very process oriented with what we're doing. And the process is what produces the results. And sometimes you can have the perfect process, have a great process, you still don't get the result. So when you start like thinking about it in terms of as a result or a trophy, or like I think that it diminishes it for some, and then also it makes it there are things that are outside of your control that you can't control about those things. So what you can control is the process, and you can control your why. And so if we get enough people in here that we get the who and the how right, and then we've got the why at the center, then we're set up for success. And more often than not, we're going to be in the hunt at the end. Doesn't mean that we're going to win it, but we're going to give ourselves an opportunity to do that. I actually had somebody approach me at the beginning of the year this year and say, hey, you're going to win your next national championship this year. And I'm like, I think players get worn out hearing that, because I think it puts pressure, it puts stress on them, it puts pressure on them. We don't think about those things at all. We don't talk about it in the locker room. It's not that it's like taboo not to talk about it. We just don't. It's not what we're focused on. And so by taking the focus off of the piece of wood you might hold up at the end of the season and putting it on something that's greater, I think it relieves a lot of the anxiety from the players.
So you've been there for 2+ decades. When we look forward, maybe another 10, another 20 years, or if you're even looking that far, what does Jason kind of foresee? Like, what do you want to continue to do with the program in terms of, like, it's developed a ton in the time from back in the day to now? Where do we go from here? How do you continue? Like, I know I've talked about, like, how do you keep staying at that level, but where do you hope to kind of continue to get this program at?
I just want to keep impacting people. Like that's honestly what I'm passionate about. It wouldn't matter if I was selling cars or, coaching soccer. I'm passionate about like having an impact on people and trying to help them become better. Not make them better, try to help them become better, help them help themselves become better. That's what I'm passionate about. I think that's what we've been focused on as a staff. And that, soccer is a piece of that, right? Like trying to get them to be the best player that they can be, but not just limiting our impact on the people to that. So regardless of what I'm doing, or, if I'm here 10 more years or I retire from here, I don't really think about that stuff. The day that I can't impact people, or I feel like I'm not impacting people, probably the day that I leave my keys on my desk. So that's what I'm passionate about. I know that's what my assistant's passionate about. Our staff is passionate about those things. And it's led us to great success, I believe. And so we're just going to continue to focus on those.
It seems like the communication loop is really big for you, like with the players, with your coaches. Um, has that been something that's been really good for you, and probably with your wife as well, in terms of like, hey, Jason needs to slow down, or like, how good are you? I guess I'm asking, and taking that feedback, if it positive and negative. How has that been as a coach? I think sometimes we think we got everything right, and you've talked about you may make some mistakes, which is easy when you get it. But what's it like when maybe a player comes off and says, hey, this isn't working tactically, or I need to go help this, or we need to flip her, or et cetera, or whatever. Or even your assistant says, hey, Jason, we need to look at this. How has that been in terms of your development?
Those are the moments that I think, I'm going to assume that everything's in a respectful manner here, right? So no one's going to come off and tell me that I'm stupid or I can't see anything. But those are the moments as a coach that excite me the most, because as I want that, like I would want a player to have the courage and the belief in their self to come up and have that conversation with me and to say that. And so the first thing that I would respond with, I'd probably just put my arm around him and be like, man, I'm proud of you for, like, I know that's hard to say. I appreciate you saying it. Let's talk about it. Like, I am far from, like I said at the beginning, this is not mine. It's really not. It belongs to the players and it belongs to God. And so I'm just here to be a steward of it and to try and water the plant as the best I can and try to make it into the best thing that we can make it into. And so I know that that requires others. That requires the players. It requires my staff. And so I am very open and hopefully very receptive to those things when they say them. Maybe they would feel different. Maybe you should bring Sam on and see if he feels differently. I don't know. But I would like to think I am, at least.
The other thing that was going through my head as soon as you were like, yeah, we're up in Michigan and all that, is how do you sell? I guess since you got quite a few Michiganders coming there, but how does one make that recruit sell of, hey, it's going to be really freaking cold and there's a lot of snow, and you were talking about doing futsal and like having to walk, like once
Yeah.
we're inside, it's nice, but I have to get there.
Yeah.
Is that just like another mindset thing of like the ones that come we know are in and they're going to deal with it? Or how does one kind of, I don't know, how do you sugarcoat it?
Michigan has 4 beautiful seasons. And it really does. But no, man, we definitely will occasionally run into the athletes that are like, no, I'm going to go play at the beach. I'm going to Palm Beach to play. That's where I'm going to play in college. And like, I understand that. I think that's a bigger deal probably with international players, because if they're not very familiar with the States, they just, out West California, they know Florida. Like those are areas that they're looking to target, the southern part of the country, that kind of a thing. But it's nothing that the Michigan players all get it and understand it. So there are a few that flee, but most of them are, it's normal. It's life for them. Right. And so we've been blessed today. It's like yesterday was like 50. And so like last 2 days we've been training outside. You don't see 50 in February here very often. So we've been training outside. Tonight we'll be inside because it's a little colder. But yeah, I'm not a fan of global warming, but it does help Michigan a little bit.
The last thing I'll ask is what is the experience? What's some of the things that you love about the NAIA experience for a player that's maybe looking and saying, I see it, but I see NCAA and I see Division I, Division II, and I see JUCO. Like, where does NAIA fit into that? And like you even talked about, one of your young ladies is now playing at the professional level. What's one of the draws? What's the one of the things that's a great fit for a player that's maybe looking right now?
One of the things that I was really blessed with several years ago was the opportunity to lead a UWS team, which is the second tier for women. They've got teams all across the country, and the sister league is the USL. So on that team, I had everything from a few of my players at Spring Arbor to I had a bunch of Michigan State players. I had Zoe Morse, who was with the Chicago Red Stars, is now overseas. She played at Virginia. We had some players out of South Dakota, like major Division I players from across the country came into Lansing for the summer and played, and they played mixed in with my players. And I learned some things. First thing that I learned was that the players that I was coaching were top shelf, top level. First thing we did was a fitness test, and 3 of my players won it. And I'm like, all right, like these are schools that have fitness coaches and strength coaches, and like they're tested weekly. And I'm like, our players are at that caliber athletically. The other thing that I learned is that we can provide a different but similar experience from a soccer standpoint. So like we don't have a football team here at Spring Arbor. We don't have that. We do soccer in the fall. It's what we do. So because I got to coach those players, I got to spend time over at Michigan State's field, and I got to see what they look like in the fall and how many fans they play in front of and what that's like, what DeMartin's like when they play the stadium. And as I compare that to what we have here at Spring Arbor, we compare very favorably. Like, we have the soccer culture from the soccer culture. It's very normal for our players to play in front of 1,000 people. Like it happens all the time. It's packed out in here. We have a great setting for it. So, the divisions, to me, I think there's fantastic soccer at every division, from junior college to, Messiah in Division III is fantastic. It's a D1 program. Division II, you've got Grand Valley and some other schools that are just their Division I programs. I would say the NAI is very similar. People would be super surprised if they took our top 10 teams. Like if you took our team and dropped us into the MAC, where Eastern Michigan, Western Michigan, Central Michigan, those teams are, we would be in the top third of that league. Like it's a very high quality of soccer. So once you can get recruits to understand that, it usually involves a visit, and it usually involves an opportunity to train. And once they've trained, they're like, oh, right. And okay, like I can see that the quality is here. Or we bring them into a game and they get to see that it's packed out and what the atmosphere is like. And they compare that with the visits that they take to Fair State or to Grand Valley or to Michigan State or whatever. That helps us be competitive, because in addition to those things, we can offer a campus where people are going to genuinely invest in them, care about them. It's not going to be just business. If you don't produce on the field, we're not going to pull your scholarship. Like that's not how that works. When we make a commitment to you, we make a commitment to you, and we're going to develop you as a person. If I swing and miss on a player, that's on me. That's not on the player. So that's how we look at it. And I think that because we can offer a pretty high quality product, that puts us in the talks with kids that are Division I players.
I have absolutely loved this chat. That's a perfect way to shut this thing down. This is Kieran with Coach's Corner Chats with Jason Crist, and I'm out. Peace.